Hello again. In this video, I want to try to walk you through a little bit of the reading I gave you from Plotinus. Um, I've got another video that will acquaint you with his thought in other ways, but I want to kind of look at the reading with you a little bit. I gave you the selection where he talks about beauty. What is it that makes certain things beautiful? Now, the modern answer is the statement, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Very few ancient people would have thought of it that way because that's highly subjective and individualistic. And that was just not their mindset. That's our mindset, okay? For ancient writers, generally, beauty is not in the eye of the beholder, it's in the object. And in the reading, lines about 27 to 34, he says that beauty in most people's mind comes from symmetry, of parts towards each other and towards a whole, or symmetry and proportion, and with a certain charm of color. Now, we actually read someone who said that earlier, Vitruvius. But Plotinus doesn't think that makes sense. Line 35, think what this means. Only a compound can be beautiful, never anything devoid of parts. And only a whole. The parts won't have beauty in themselves, but only working together to make a beautiful whole. But Plotinus says that doesn't make sense. Beauty in an aggregate demands beauty in details. No matter how many ugly things you put together, you're not going to make something beautiful. Loveliness of color and even sunlight doesn't have any parts, so can't be symmetrical or proportionate. Gold. Lightning at night, the stars. These things are beautiful, but this definition of beauty doesn't fit them. So he says that definition is not right. Beauty, he says, line about 65 or so, comes from the principle of beauty, the idea of beauty, the form of beauty. Plotinus is working with Platonic thought. In Plato, the highest ideas are truth, beauty, and goodness, and they are related. And so he says this principle of beauty exists, and it's something that we perceive at first glance, something which the soul names as from an ancient knowledge and recognizing welcomes it, enters into unison with it. Have you ever been to like a family reunion where you meet relatives that you hadn't met before, and yet there is this feeling of kinship and a closeness that really, in some ways, may not make a whole lot of sense because you don't actually know these people. But yet you feel this kinship to them. Well, that's what Plotinus is saying happens. You see, the highest being in Plato's philosophy, he calls the One. It's the form or the idea of goodness. That is, for Plotinus, the source of everything. And the One emanates out of itself mind. Mind, in turn, emanates out of itself the world soul. And our souls come from this world soul. And so, since beauty and goodness are related, when we see something in which beauty resides, we recognize it as kin and we latch on to it. But let the soul fall in with the ugly, and at once it shrinks within itself, denies the thing, turns away from it. Our interpretation is that the soul, by the very truth of its nature, by its affiliation to the noblest existence in the hierarchy of being, goodness, beauty, and truth, when it sees anything of that kin or any trace of that kinship, thrills with an immediate delight, takes its own to itself, and thus stirs anew to the sense of its nature and all its affinity. You know, we recognize kinship with our true self, and so we latch on to it. But he says that there are beauties that go beyond physical objects that you can see. Line about 121, there are earlier and loftier beauties than these. In the sense-bound life we are no longer granted to know them, but the soul, taking no help from the organs, sees and proclaims them. Is there, for example, such a thing as a beautiful spirit? Or, to borrow the title of a movie a number of years back now, called A Beautiful Mind? You know, does that make any sense? The idea of a beautiful mind? I think it does. In fact, I would argue that when it comes to choosing a life partner, a beautiful spirit, a beautiful personality is more important than a beautiful body. Newsflash, you're going to get uglier as you get older. Most of us look better in our 20s than we do in our 60s. I have pictures to prove it. And so for Plotinus, the real beauty is beauty of spirit, beauty of soul. And this leads him to another aspect of his thought, lines about 175 to 185. If a man's been immersed in filth or daubed with mud, his native comeliness disappears, and all that is seen is the foul stuff besmearing him. His ugly condition is due to alien matter that has encrusted him, and if he is to win back his grace, it must be his business to scour and purify himself and make himself what he was. He needs to take a bath. Just so, we may say, a soul becomes ugly by something foisted upon it, by sinking itself into the alien, by a fall, a descent into body, into matter. Okay? Plotinus, our souls fall into this lower world of matter, of physical bodies, material substances. The soul is trapped in the body. For Plotinus, soul or mind is good, body is bad, and everything to do with the body is bad. The dishonor of the soul is in its ceasing to be clean and apart. Gold is degraded when it's mixed with earthly particles. If these be worked out, the gold is left and is beautiful, isolated from all that's foreign, gold with gold alone. And so with the soul, let it be but cleared of the desires that come by its too intimate conversation with the body, emancipated from all the passions, purged of all that embodiment is thrust upon it, withdrawn a solitary to itself again. In that moment, the ugliness that came only from the alien is stripped away. we need to purify our souls from everything that comes from being immersed in the body, in physical matter. All of the passions, all of the bodily desires for comfort and pleasure of every kind, that we need to purge ourselves of, purify ourselves from. Line 195, what else is sophrosune? Self-control or self-discipline. In like Aristotle, the concept is moderation. Okay? Not too much, not too little, just the right amount. But for Plotinus, it means taking no part in the pleasures of the body. To break away from them is unclean and unworthy of the clean. For the Neoplatonists, as far as they were concerned, the only good lifestyle when it comes to human sexuality is the lifestyle of celibacy. No marriage, no sex. So to courage is but being fearless of death, which is but the parting of soul from the body. And that parting is something that no one can dread, whose delight is to be his unmingled self. For Plotinus, the soul is trapped in the body, and we yearn to be freed from the body and return to the upper world, the spiritual world, from which we came. The soul thus cleansed is all idea and reason, wholly free of body, intellective, entirely of that divine order from which the wellspring of beauty rises, and all the race of beauty. Okay. We need to purify our souls from everything that comes from attachment to the body. And we do this by focusing our minds on higher things like mathematics and such. By asceticism, self-denial. You live celibate. You eat only very simple, plain foods. You dress very plainly, very simply. You don't pay attention to looks. You focus your mind on philosophy, on the intellect, away from everything to do with the body. Line 285. How are you to see into a virtuous soul and know its loveliness? Withdraw into yourself and look. And if you do not find yourself beautiful yet, and he's not talking about beautiful looking, he's talking about beautiful spirit, beautiful soul. Act as does the creator of a statue that's to be made beautiful. He cuts away here, he smooths there, he makes this line lighter, this other purer. Work at refining your soul, purifying your soul, until a lovely face is grown upon his work. So do you also. Cut away all that's excessive. Straighten out all that's crooked. Bring light to all that is overcast. Labor to make all one glow of beauty, and never cease chiseling your statue until there shall shine out on you from it the godlike splendor of virtue, until you shall see the perfect goodness surely established in the stainless shrine of your soul. If you are able to separate your soul from attachment to the body, as long as we're in this world, that can only happen in brief moments, where you experience union with the One. We would say union with God. You feel yourself so caught up into God that you lose yourself in God. We're going to talk about this mystical experience several times before we're done. It is the experience of oneness with the divine, however you think of the divine. For Plotinus, the divine is the one, the idea of goodness. That takes on really the function of God for Plotinus. We can only experience this union in this life in a transitory way, for a few moments at a time. According to his disciple Porphyry, Plotinus had this experience 4 times. But once you have it, then you know that when your soul is finally separated from the body by death, it will be reunited with the one from which it ultimately came. And for Plotinus, that is our ultimate goal. The idea is that the body is a prison that separates us from our real self and our real home, which is the one. And our souls long to be set free to return from whence they came. And so everything to do with the body, with its desires, its pleasures, its passions and emotions, all that is bad. And we need to eliminate that from ourselves, purify ourselves from it, if we are going to be reunited with the one. That is salvation in a Neoplatonist perspective. Essentially what Plotinus does is he turns Plato's philosophy into a religion. And it's in this environment that early Christianity was developing. It's in this context that some of the stuff you're going to read later on that emphasizes celibacy, this is where that comes from.